Hey everyone, today we're diving into something that every single designer and developer deals with. Constraints. You know, all those rules and limits. But what if I told you that the very things that feel like they're holding us back are actually our greatest secret weapons? Yeah, let's get into it.
We have all been there, right? You've got the super tight budget, a deadline that feels totally impossible, and a list of technical requirements that feels, I don't know, like a straitjacket. It is so easy to see these limitations as just roadblocks, things getting in the way of you doing something truly amazing.
You know the saying, it's that classic rebellious little phrase that feels kind of good to say when you're staring down a mountain of restrictions. But what if that is the completely wrong way to look at it, especially when you're building something for the web?
And that, right there, is the big idea for today. Instead of fighting the rules or trying to break them, we're going to see how to use them as a foundation, how to turn those frustrating limitations into the very structure that makes a project not just good, but absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so let's get on the same page. We need to nail down exactly what we mean when we say constraints in the world of web design, because it's a whole lot more than just a list of things you can't do.
So, simply put, a constraint is any boundary that shapes the project. Think of it as the set of fixed points on a map. It could be time, it could be money, technology, or even something like the client's strict brand guidelines. They're the things we have to navigate around to get to our destination.
This quote just reframes the whole conversation perfectly, doesn't it? Constraints aren't just problems we have to solve. They're actually a tool for focus. They force us to make really clear, deliberate choices instead of getting totally lost in an ocean of infinite possibilities.
And here is the perfect real-world example. I mean, think about Google's homepage. That iconic, unbelievable simplicity wasn't just some random design choice made in a vacuum of unlimited freedom. No way. It was the direct result of having very real budget and technical limits early on. And that forced simplicity, it ended up becoming its greatest strength.
So if these constraints are so important, what do they actually look like in the wild? Well, they usually fall into four big categories that pretty much every web project has to deal with.
So we're going to quickly walk through these four areas. We'll kick things off with the business side of things, then get into the tech limits, the creative rules, and finally, the super important legal and security stuff you just can't ignore.
This is really where it all begins. These are the big picture pressures coming from management, from the client. They basically define the sandbox we have to play in. We're talking budget, timeline, and scope.
The classic project management triangle. You've probably seen this before. You can have it fast and big, but it won't be good. Or you can have it good and fast, but then it can't be big. You get the idea. You only get to pick two. So here's the key. That tight deadline isn't just a problem. It's a decision-making tool. It forces you to prioritize. This is also where you fight the dreaded scope creep. You know, when new features keep getting tacked on, threatening to throw the whole thing off balance.
All right, next up are the technical constraints. This is the real nuts and bolts of it all. We're talking about the limitations that come from the technology itself, from the code, the servers, and the platforms our websites actually run on.
Okay, let's be really clear about this. Speed is everything. A slow website is an absolute project killer. It frustrates your users, it gets you punished by search engines like Google, and it will tank your conversions. You have to design for performance from day one. It's not some feature you can just sprinkle on at the end. It's a fundamental, non-negotiable constraint.
And here's a perfect, almost painful, real-world scenario. Imagine your site goes viral. Awesome, right? Well, not if you haven't planned for it. Scalability, your site's ability to handle a sudden flood of traffic, is a technical constraint you ignore at your own risk. Success can literally crash your site.
Now let's talk about the stuff your users actually see and click on. These constraints are all about creating an experience that's consistent, easy to use, and builds trust.
There are really three big pillars here. First, the user experience, or UX, has to be dead simple and intuitive. Second, you need a plan for your content so it doesn't get old and stale. And third, the branding, your colors, your fonts, your logos, has to be ruthlessly consistent. This is what builds trust and makes the whole thing feel professional.
This last category, well, it's completely non-negotiable. These are the rules you absolutely, positively have to follow to keep your website, your business, and most importantly, your users safe and out of a whole lot of trouble. We're talking about major stuff here. From data privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA that protect a user's personal information, to accessibility guidelines that make sure people with disabilities can actually use your site, these aren't just suggestions, they're requirements. And things like securing credit card data and respecting intellectual property, that's not just good practice, it's the law.
Okay, so we've laid out all of these rules, these hurdles, these boundaries. It sounds a little depressing, doesn't it? But this is where we get to the most important, most powerful idea of this entire explainer.
You know, after looking at all this, the tight budgets, the crazy deadlines, the legacy code, the legal checklists, it's so easy to just think of constraints as something you just have to put up with, a necessary evil you endure. But is that really the whole story?
No, not at all. They are a necessary good. This is the big twist. Those limitations aren't the enemy of creativity. They are the very thing that sparks it.
So here's the paradox, right? When you have fewer options, you are forced to focus on what actually matters. All the noise just disappears. When you have less time or less money, you have to find the most direct, the most efficient paths to your goal. But most importantly, when the obvious solution is off the table because of a constraint, you are forced to invent a new one. That is the engine of innovation.
So let's bring this all home. The next time you get a project brief with a long list of constraints, don't look at it as a burden. I want you to see it as a toolkit.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. In your own work, right now, what's the one limit, maybe it's your budget, your timeline, or some piece of tech, that you can start to reframe? What's the one rule you can use not as a barrier, but as a launch pad for your most focused, your most efficient, and your most creative work yet?